Hi, my name is Phil and I enjoy talking about politics, and the winner for the poll for today's discussion was, well, what's the next step for Parliament? Although I have sort of realised that one of the other topics, which was about Jeremy Corbyn's plan proposal to May, is going to have to come in here as well. So it's sort of two for the price of one. But anyway, so where we left it off, it seems like a long time. The last week and a half has seemed to drag on. There's a lot happened. But as we left the wondrous twists and turns of Westminster Recall, Parliament had just voted for Theresa May to go back to the EU and have the backstop removed from the withdrawal agreement. Now, the one aspect of the agreement for which neither side has a legal right to remove. So basically, I took that as effectively Parliament trying to push party politics over the country's well-being. They all know that every extra week's uncertainty is costing the UK more investment. It's costing businesses in the UK. So kicking the can further down the road has economic cost to the nation, but they are judging only the political cost to their party of acting positively. No one really wants to act positively towards a resolution. That is the problem at the moment. But the EU has told May in no uncertain terms that the backstop is non-negotiable. In theory, the Prime Minister is supposed to return to Parliament next week with an updated deal. This, of course, is not going to happen. There is then a vote on the deal for which she's going to have to say, yeah, right, we're going to vote on this deal. Hasn't really changed a lot. In fact, you could be forgiven for thinking it hasn't changed at all. But look, I've printed it on different coloured paper. So I believe that's supposed to be next Wednesday. And then I believe that next Thursday, there will then be a debate on what is to happen next. That will be interesting. Do you know what I'm super interested in? What Theresa May is going to have to come back with. She's got to say something. So I'm actually looking forward to that. Now, as I said recently, a good indicator for whether Parliament is prepared to take positive action to avoid no deal would be cancelling the February recess. Parliament's got another week, and then it has normally a week and a half off. Now, they have actually cancelled the February recess, but it's nothing to get super excited about, maybe, because it turns out the reason was simply to allow more time to keep passing the necessary legislation needed to leave the EU, which at the moment is not on course for completion. I get the impression it's not even close. But that being said, even using the recess for that purpose still wouldn't be enough time to get all that legislation through. So although that might be the reason given, I am just wondering if it's possible that the government are hoping the recess gets used for something more positive as well, even though the official stated reason is just to tidy up legislation. Either way, Parliament will now consider, basically, it will be sitting all the way up to March 29th now without breaks. Well, actually March 28th. March 29th is a Friday, which is not a sitting day for Parliament. So the situation, unless something earth-shattering happens, will be as follows. Next Thursday, the Prime Minister will have not been able to put a plan forward. So I'm guessing there won't have been a vote on anything, because what could you vote on? So Parliament will have to debate the next course of action. If they don't agree on one, then they're basically saying no deal it is. As far as I can tell. I mean, there's been so many twists and turns in this. Maybe there's still some more to come. So what would they have to rally around? There were some indicative votes which suggested that there isn't a majority for anything really, but that was before the Prime Minister would have to say there is no deal anymore. At the point at which Theresa May has to say, we don't have a deal, we need to do something else, maybe that will, jog some people into action. I don't know. So many of the votes, such as for an extension for Article 50, got close to a majority, so maybe they would be worth revisiting. I'm not sure. Jeremy Corbyn threw a lifeline, basically, or a spanner in the works, depending on your point of view. He's written a letter to the Prime Minister, basically thanking her for the meeting they had last week and suggesting that he would support her withdrawal agreement as long as it meets 5 key criteria, which is basically not her withdrawal agreement at all. So what are these key criteria? Well, they are 1, that a permanent and comprehensive UK-wide customs union. 2, close alignment with the single market, but with the UK having a say in EU trade deals. And that's a little bit ambiguous. 3, that we keep rights and protections in line with the EU. 4, that we commit to participation in a range of EU agencies. And 5, agreements on future security arrangements. Now, personally, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. In terms of the first one, the Prime Minister can't accept the customs union without splitting her party. Remember, the reason why we have all this fuss over the backstop in the first place is because enough of her party don't want a customs union. If we wanted a customs union, the backstop would be a complete non-issue. It wouldn't actually exist. If we arrange for a customs union, and it makes no difference whether we arrange it now, which, okay, there's not enough time now, or during the transition period, it doesn't matter. As long as we arrange it before that transition period finishes, the backstop ceases to be a thing. But of course, you know, so that's not going to get that support. So for that reason, given the way she's behaved so far, you've got to think that she would reject that. It's all right her saying that she'd be considering it. She knows that she can't take positive action on it. Unless, of course, she just decides to sod it and let her, you know, face down part of her party. I don't know. The other thing is, he says about close alignment with the single market. I'm not sure what that is. I mean, what does close alignment with the single market mean when you're not in the single market? I'm not saying such a thing is impossible, but I don't understand what he means by that. But then to say the UK has a say in EU trade deals. Now, to have a say in EU trade deals, you are a member of the EU. I mean, we've been, you know, although when I've talked about the fact that we've had the EU make trade deals for us, we've been part of that. You remember, the UK is a fifth of the wealth of the EU. Currently, you better believe we've had a major say in trade deals. But how we have a say in those trade deals when we're not a member of the EU? I'm not saying it's politically impossible, but it seems odd. That being said, it is potentially possible that what he's saying would be the good groundings of a starting position for negotiations. But you really can't imagine that we'd get all of these things to happen. So is Jeremy Corbyn just making the offer to needle Parliament? Well, I thought so at first. At first, I thought he's just thrown this out just so he can look like he's trying to help out, but without actually getting his hands on the deal itself or any part of Brexit. Until I read an article by the BBC, which actually for once made a good point on this topic. Labour used to have 6 criteria. I'd completely forgotten about this. They used to have 6 key criteria that were needed in order to support a deal. Because what they've done, they've come up with these criteria for a deal where they've said, if you meet these criteria, which we think are terribly important, then we will support your deal. But if you don't, then we won't. It allowed them to basically say, we're going to vote against any deal that doesn't meet these. So it allowed them to vote against any deal Theresa May brought to the House without looking like they were just trying to frustrate Brexit, which is the obvious thing to do, standard political technique that. But there was a 6th condition, and the 6th condition was that whatever deal we got should ensure that we would not be worse off than as a full member of the EU. Now, of course, that test is impossible to meet because any deal, no matter how good, is inevitably going to be worse than being a full member of the EU. So, yeah, it meant that he got away with voting against it and just saying, well, sorry, I said what my conditions were a long time ago. But that condition has now mysteriously disappeared. Now, that might be a suggestion that he has switched from wanting excuses to block any deal to wanting to make a positive stand for a Brexit deal, but one that meets the Labour principles, of course. Now, there's a fine line to be walked by prominent MPs at the moment. I do understand this. On the one hand, none of them want to bear the responsibility for a no-deal Brexit. But none of them want to seem like they stood back and watched it happen either. And when they are like Jeremy Corbyn has the power to fully get behind, for example, another referendum. And I'm not saying definitely make it happen, but there'd be a bloody good chance of him making it happen if he got behind it. He is powerful enough in Parliament that he can't just at the end of this process say, well, there's nothing I could do. Yes, there was. He doesn't have as much power, of course, as the Prime Minister. But he does have a fair amount of power as leader of the opposition. So, getting involved potentially taints you with what happens next, but being a bystander means you didn't really help to avoid it. But I don't think it's a serious offer. A lot of articles are sort of seeming to suggest it was just because of the loss of that condition. But the thing is, he still has 5 conditions, some of which are subjective, by the way. He knows that Theresa May can't possibly agree to support the customs union, even though that could certainly gain enough parliaments to potentially pass the agreement. In fact, a commitment to a customs union would actually see a large majority vote for it, I think. But most of that support would come from the opposition benches, even though many would prefer another referendum. His support has had some his proposal, has had some support from the EU with Guy Verhofstadt, yes, basically one of the Brexit coordinators, one of the guys involved in the Brexit stuff. But even though he said, he approves of it, he approves of the idea of it, he said it would have to command a large majority in Parliament. He doesn't want to see a deal sneaking through with a few votes, because although technically that would be passed, he knows that it would only be a proposal, not a final deal. And a proposal that only just sneaks through a year and a half down the line, once it gets to brass tacks again, he could see as easily no longer having the support of Parliament. And it falls at the final hurdle again, just like this withdrawal agreement has. So he wants something that Parliament really gets behind. But although people are getting excited by the slumbering Corbyn finally waking up on Brexit, I don't see it getting anywhere unless he pushes it very strongly. Writing a letter to the Prime Minister isn't the same as pushing it in the Commons. That's what he would have to do. Now, a number of Labour MPs, although they may vote for it if forced between that or no deal, are actually pretty angry with Corbyn for doing this in the first place. And the reason for that is because he promised that if he couldn't get a general election, that he would back the people's vote of referendum. And no, saying that it's still on the table is not the same as getting behind it. Apart from anything else, the table is going to be gone in a few weeks. Come March the 29th, if nothing happens, there is no table to keep anything on. So it's really rather pointless. It's not actually on the table unless you're going to... At some point, in fact, I would say next Thursday, that's when MPs have to decide, of all the things on the table, what they are going to go with, because it may well be the last roll of the dice. And in a situation like that, any MPs will be choosing a side. There's no such thing as neutrality. If any of them try and sit on the fence or back an unrealistic strategy like last week, that is them saying they're getting behind no deal. But even if Parliament do consider something positive, I still wonder about ERG having a nuclear option. I've mused about this in the past. I don't know if this is realistic. This is wild speculation. I do not know what the legal or constitutional situation would be in a situation like this, and I do not know if it's something that they would therefore do, although I do think they would have the motivation to do it if it would work. So here's the thing. At the moment, the ERG and their supporters, the ones that actually want no deal, have been, I've talked about this before, getting increasingly desperate. You've got the situation like Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, who's saying, oh no, we can still carry on having 10 years of tariff-free trade, Article 24, which says nothing of the kind. He's just making stuff up because he knows that the people who listen to him don't fact-check. We've had the owner of Wetherspoons, there's a pub chain in this country, very, very anti-European. He has been, I've got a booklet through my letterbox with a full of Brexit propaganda about it. They're really pushing this very, very hard. And you think to yourself, if no deal is what's going to happen? Why would they be doing it? They've won. But no, they're panicking. So imagine a situation where Parliament gets behind something positive. It looks like it's going to, and it doesn't matter whether it's a referendum to try and get out of Brexit altogether, or even a withdrawal agreement that's actually going to gain the support of the House, because they don't want that either. They know with absolute certainty that the only way to arrive at any sort of deal with the EU is going to involve a customs union. Surely to goodness. It's the only way to preserve the Good Friday Agreement. And we're also likely to want, as Jeremy Corbyn says, some alignment with the single market. Preferably in it. I don't think he says that, but, we do want some. We want to be in the single market, don't we? And he knows that as time goes on, that's what Parliament will go for. He doesn't want that. Remember, he is motivated by avoiding these tax avoidance laws. Desperately doesn't want that to happen. And if we have to accept EU standards, that is going to happen. So, what about the nuclear option? Let us say that it got to the point where it looks like Parliament were going to get behind something. So he's thinking, hang on, no deal's off the table now. What if he gave the nod to Jeremy Corbyn and said, look, if you, because he wants the general election, remember, if you put in another vote of no confidence in the government, we will support you. In other words, they'll assassinate their own party. And I know when I said this last time, some people say, oh, no, they're totally loyal to the Conservative Party. Well, no, they're not. Whether they would do this is another matter, but I believe they would. And in which case, of course, Jeremy Corbyn could do that. It would trigger, it would basically finish off the government. There'd be 2 weeks before, you know, if no other government could emerge, then general election is going to be called. In that chaos, I don't know what the situation is. Is that something that he could use to completely scupper it? Because in the chaos of that, to do anything now, we're going to need an extension. If we get behind anything positive, it can't be done by the 29th. We're going to need an extension come what may. And if the chaos of that means that, do we even have anyone to formally request that extension? Even if Theresa May could still technically do it for those 2 weeks before it was verified that we have to dissolve Parliament, in a situation like that, would she? Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe strange things will happen. Maybe she would just self-destruct. I don't know. I don't know in a situation like this. But that is an intriguing, if terrifying, prospect. I mean, in the ensuing chaos there of no government and only a few weeks before Brexit Day, we may end up, well, just crashing out with a majority of Parliament having no way to avoid it. I don't know. But that's a series of events unheard of, so I can't say what a realistic prospect would be. All I do know is the ERG will inevitably have been discussing plans and scenarios of how Parliament might frustrate their no-deal Brexit and have come up with some plans to deal with it. I am certain of that. They will also have the popular media batting for them, of course. I could hardly suppress a laugh today. Basically, I saw the headline on the BBC News. You can see the headlines of these papers. I don't go out and buy the bloody things. And the Daily Express was amazing. After Tusk's little speech a couple of days ago. So it described that May had delivered a scathing attack on Tusk after his comments the previous day. Now, as far as I can tell, all she actually said was these comments were unhelpful, which is, you know, the usual diplomatic language when you don't like what someone said. And to be honest, we only have her word. She said that. The meeting wasn't in public. I'll be honest, I can sort of imagine the meeting. I don't think Tusk was too bothered by it either way. You can sort of imagine Theresa May having her meeting with Donald Tusk and saying, I don't think those comments were terribly helpful. To which, if I was Donald Tusk, I would have just laughed back and gone, well, bloody helpful to me. And I'd have just laughed it off. Simple as that. And I'll bet that's all there was to it. The idea that she gave him a dressing down, it's just this jingoistic media trying to still go, oh, Britannia rules the waves attitude, all this nonsense that they still keep pushing on gullible people who don't seem to realise that the Empire days are gone. And they'll keep up that line. They'll keep it up and keep it up no matter what happens. So basically, I would expect more jingoistic headlines of that nature in a vain attempt to try and keep MPs in what Conservatives like to call cloud cuckoo land. But people have seen what Brexit is doing to the country. They've seen that the promised Brexit terms don't exist. And MPs are seeing the edge of the cliff now as well. So I would expect in 1 week's time some positive course of action will emerge. I mean, I've expected things in the past and been disappointed. But not what happened last week with them saying, oh, just go back and renegotiate, cannot happen next week. Because May has gone to the EU and tried to renegotiate. And they've basically said to her, no. The only possible strategy in the mind of a madman that you can even contemplate is, well, I'll tell you what, we'll wait until March the 27th because I reckon the EU will crack. We'll just wait for them to accept our terms. That's the only thing she could possibly say. At which point, I would imagine Parliament would become rather alarmed. Because that's all she can do. She can't come back to Parliament next week and say, well, I'm trying to renegotiate it. It's taking a little longer. I'm going to keep trying to renegotiate. Because people will just say, they've told you no. You've gone over there. They've told you to piss off. You know. So I am genuinely expecting, I'm not going to say I'm 100% because who knows. I am genuinely expecting something to emerge at the end of next week on Thursday, potentially Wednesday, Thursday. I don't see Jeremy Corbyn's plan being seriously taken up. But again, if he decides to push it very hard in Parliament, but then we'll just have to see what happens with his Parliamentary Labour Party as well, because they're not happy with him. I'm sure they would back it if it's that or no deal, that they're not happy. But then, you know, Theresa May's party is not happy either. And she won't back it for that reason. So I think something else will have to happen. Someone's going to have to take a positive step. Otherwise, we are going to crash out. Because I see no even delusional steps we can take. Other than, as I say, deciding to just carry on as normal and expect the EU to crack on the last day. So there we go. That's Parliament's next step. We need to keep an eye on next Wednesday and next Thursday. Next Wednesday for what the Prime Minister says to Parliament. Next Thursday for the debates that happen in Parliament. And then we'll find out more. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, click the bell notification, and of course comment down below. And until next time, I'll see you later.